Michelle Sharnik. I'm a student counselor. I am going to be taking you through learning styles today. So welcome students and welcome to my colleagues as well. I'm going to put my camera off now and I'm going to share my presentation and we're going to get straight into the workshop today. Okay, so today we're covering learning styles. The objectives for the session and what I hope you are going to be able to gain at the end of the session is to be able to identify your own learning style, understand how you may differ from others in terms of how you approach your studies, how you process the information that you learn, so that you can then determine a way that works best for you when you study. And then to also be able to know the strengths that come with your learning style and the potential areas that need development, and to be able to improve on your skills in these specific areas. And these areas are essential to your academic success. So just to start off, in terms of learning styles, this picture says one size does not fit all. So we are all unique. We all have a different learning style, and we need to identify that learning style because it really helps you understand how you learn. It helps you to maximize your learning experience. So what is a learning style? A learning style refers to what your preferences in how you gather information, how you interpret information, and organize and think about the information. So when you learn something for the first time, you would have a specific individual preference as to how you go about thinking about the information and interpreting it and organizing it. So it's really important because you need to understand your learning style in order to really maximize your learning experience, in order to get the best out of it, in order to also know what your strengths are and be guided by those strengths, and also know the potential areas of development so that you can work on that and you then are able to learn better throughout your academic journey. So we're going to be looking at a specific learning style today, which is the Kolb's learning style theory. There are many different theories, but in terms of today, we're focusing on Kolb's one. And Kolb's model of learning is one of the best and one of the most widely used. It gives you an overall understanding of your particular learning style. And as I go through it, you will gather for yourself. I'm hoping that you're going to be nodding. I'm hoping that you're going to gather for yourself and go, okay, that actually sounds like me. So it's an overall learning theory, which is very helpful to give you an overall understanding as to how you learn and how you approach learning as well. So David Kolb was a psychologist, and he first outlined this many, many years ago. And he believed, and through research, we see that our individual learning styles emerge from a combination of our genetics and our life experiences, as well as our environment, which means it is able to be adaptable. So it's not always going to be rigid. You can grow in certain areas. You can improve on your strengths because of the way the learning styles actually developed. So Kolb talks about an experiential learning cycle. So I need you to stick with me. There's a bit of theory, but as we actually go through the questionnaire and you discover your learning style, it's going to make more sense. But for now, I need you to kind of stick with me and just hear out the explanations. So Kolb's experiential learning style is typically presented by a 4-style learning cycle, which means as a learner, you will touch on each of these because it's a cycle. So it's what you would go through every single time you learn. So we get your concrete experience, which is your initial learning experience. Then you get your reflective observation. So it's how you now reflect on what you've just learned. Then the next stage is your abstract conceptualization, which is the conclusions, the thinking and the modification of, and the reflecting on the idea and coming to a conclusion about what you learned. And then the last stage is your active experimentation. This is where you now use what you've learned. So whether that means you've learned something, a new principle in accounting, and now you use it out in a practical example. So that's that end stage. So basically, as a learner, you would touch on all four bases, but your learning style is a preference as to which base you kind of lean towards, and I'll explain that a little bit more. So effective learning is seen when a person progresses through these four stages and be able to touch on each one. So an example, if I have to give you an example of this experiential learning cycle, is you have your concrete experience. So let's say you are, for the first time, you're a first year student, you learning how to use my Unisa. And let's say the DLA shows you the steps as to how to use it, right? This is your experience of learning something. You then think about what you've just performed. So they showed you the steps. You are thinking about those steps. Your next step is maybe now reviewing or reading through a guide, maybe to get a clear understanding of those steps or what you've just gone through. And then that fourth stage is now jumping in and actually starting to use my Unisa. So you can see practically how these four stages of learning play out. So now, what is a learning style? So Kolb's learning theory, he sets out four distinct learning styles. He explains that different people naturally prefer a certain single different learning style. So naturally, we have a preference towards something, and your learning style is a preference and a product of two separate choices that we make. I'm going to explain those choices in a few minutes. And Kolb then represents these choices on two lines of axis. Okay, so these are now your two choices. Okay, so you can see the two axes. The one axis is about perception, and the other one is about processing. Okay, so when it comes to processing, the processing is how we approach a task. The perception is our response to what we've learned, whether we lean towards an emotional response or whether we lean towards how we are actually thinking about it. And you will see that experiential learning cycle is happening there. But as we make certain choices, maybe we are, in terms of our perception, we tend to feel more, and in some terms of how we approach something, we tend to observe more. Then we will fall into this distinct learning style. And so based on our choices between the two choices between what our perception and the two choices on processing, we will then come to discover what your learning style is. And Cole believed that we cannot perform both at the same time as we're going through this learning cycle. And so we would have a choice, which would be our preference, and the product of those two choices then become our learning style. I hope you are still with me. So let's go through the vertical axis, which is the perception, okay? So this one is about how you grasp information. You have that concrete experience of learning. It could be that you grasp information more and your response is more of an emotional one or a feeling one. So how you feel about the experience of learning. Can you associate it with something? Is it maybe making you feel a bit overwhelmed? And then the other choice on the same axis is about whether you prefer how you respond is in thinking about what it is you've just learned. So you could lean towards either or on your perception axis. Okay, so are you more, when you learn something for the first time, do you focus on ideas? Do you focus on theories? Are you more a logical thinker and an abstract thinker? Are you more factual? So the choice here on processing would either be towards more how you felt about your learning experience or how you actually think about your learning experience. And this specific axis is about you grasping information. How do you take it in? Are you taking it in firstly by how you feel, or are you taking it in based on how you think about it? Your next axis is the horizontal axis, and this has got to do with your processing. So now you've taken the information in, you're now transferring the information. So what do you do with the information you have just learned? How do you go about understanding it? And here you are making a choice between behavioral and performing, or observing. So do you lean towards jumping in, acting out your learning experience? Okay, they just showed you the steps to using my Unisa. Are you straight away trying it out? Or are you reflecting a little bit? Are you looking at the My Unisa site and reflecting on the different options before you jump in? So you'd be making a choice based on your preference. And the main idea here is, what do you do with the information that you've taken in? How do you approach a task? And those choices on the vertical axis, on the horizontal axis, your preference between those two would then, we combine those two to figure out your particular learning style. Okay, so as you see here, we would be able to indicate and figure out what your learning style is. Okay, so we're going to jump straight in now, and we are going to go through the learning style inventory. It's a questionnaire that is used to identify and discover your learning style. It's not a standardized assessment, but it does indicate and identify your learning style. And the benefits of really knowing your learning style, again, it gets you to think about how you learn. It gets you to consider whether you need to include more alternatives based on that learning cycle that I explained to you. And also for you to not be too rigid. So once you discover your learning style, it's not just about sticking to your strengths of that learning style, but it's also now discovering, okay, what is it that I also need to start to work on so that I can be touching all the different bases of the learning cycle. Okay, so because we're doing this online, you're not going to have a paper, you're not going to have a booklet in front of you. But what I would like you to do, if possible, get yourself a piece of paper and a pen. This is the only way you are going to be able to, based on the fact that we are virtual, this is the only way you are going to be able to go through this learning style indicator and be able to determine what your learning style is. Okay, so quickly while I'm going through the instructions, if you can just grab yourself a piece of paper and a pen so that you can be able to write down your answers, basically. Okay, so the instructions are very, very simple. We're going to go through basically 9 statements. You're only going to choose 1 statement per row. And you're choosing the statement that most closely describes you. How do you know something most closely describes you? It's if you read it and you go, oh, I do that. Okay? So for number 1, you're going to choose either A or B, and you're going to put a tick. So what I'm going to ask you to do on your little piece of paper, you're going to write down 1 to 9. You're going to put it that you're going to make 2 columns. You're going to do A and B. And for each statement we go through, you are going to be ticking either under column A or under column B. Okay? In total, you've got to have 9 ticks. And that will indicate that you didn't miss out answering a particular question. Okay? Right. So we are going to start here. So again, all you need to do is write down that 1 to 9 on your piece of paper, have column A and column B. And then you are going to, for each one, you're only choosing one statement. You're either choosing the statement. So I'll do the first one. I often produce off-the-cuff ideas that at first might seem silly or half-baked. So that means I haven't thought through the idea, but I kind of go with that idea, off-the-cuff idea, okay, that comes up that I haven't really worked through yet. If that's you, then you are putting a tick under your A column. For the same for number 1, I'm thorough and methodical. If that is you and that closely resembles you, then you are putting a tick for B. Okay. Does that make sense? I hope that makes sense for everybody. I can't see. If there's maybe some questions in the chat, if you're confused about the instructions in any way, just put something in the chat or put it in the Q&A, and I'll ask my colleagues to read it out to me. I'm going to go through each one for you, okay, so that you can then make your ticks in the appropriate column. Number 2 is, I'm normally the one who initiates conversation. So you'd tick A if that is you. I enjoy watching people. If that's what you enjoy, then you tick B if that sounds like you. Number 3, I am flexible and open-minded. Tick A if that sounds like you. I am careful and cautious. Tick B if that sounds like you. Number 4, I like to try new and different things without too much preparation. Tick A if that sounds like you. I investigate a new topic or process in depth before trying it. Okay, so if that sounds like you are ticking B. Number 5, I'm happy to have a go at new things. Tick A if that sounds like you. I draw up lists of possible courses of action when starting a new project. Tick B if that sounds like you. Number 6, I like to get involved and participate. Or I like to read and observe. Number 7, I'm loud and outgoing. Or I am quiet and somewhat shy. Number 8, I make quick and bold decisions. Or I make cautious and logical decisions. And number 9, I speak fast while I'm thinking, or I speak slowly after thinking. So I'm just going to check with my colleagues if there's any questions, if anybody's questions in the Q&A or chat, if anybody's confused.
Yes, there's one comment here. A student said, I don't understand, please repeat. But there's no other question. That's the only comment.
Okay. Thank you so much, Sunny. Okay, so I'm going to just repeat the instruction, and I'm going to use number 1 as an example. So for number 1, you're choosing between the 2 statements. There's 2 statements you can see there. And the first statement falls under column A, which is I often produce off-the-cuff ideas that at first might seem silly or half-baked. Or if that doesn't sound like you, then the second statement is I'm thorough and methodical. So then you would be ticking B. Okay, so there's 2 statements for 1 to 9. one statement falls under column A, the second statement falls under column B, and you are ticking for each one. For number one, you're either ticking A or ticking B. For number two, A, B. Number three, A or B. Number four, A or B. Number five, A or B. Number six, A or B. Number seven, the same, 8 and 9. Okay, I'm going to move on to the next one. I hope everyone's had enough time to choose. If you haven't, please just put something in the chat so that I can stay on this slide a little bit longer. Okay, colleagues, anything in the chat? Can I go forward?
Nothing so far.
Thank you, Beauty.
question.
Thank you, Beauty.
There's a question. What if you feel both A and B statement apply to you?
Okay, so when you feel both apply to you, the question is, which one do you lean towards more? Which one do you do more? So let's take number two. I'm normally the one to initiate conversations. Do you do that more, or do you find that you actually enjoy watching people more? So the one that you are doing more of would be the one that more closely represents you. Okay, I'm going to move to the next one if nobody's indicated that I need to stop. Okay, so basically this is what you are doing. Sorry, I should have showed you the text, but this is what you are doing in terms of your A and B column. So you're only choosing one statement for each column. Right, so let's go to C or D now. Okay, so again, you're doing the same thing, but this is for two different columns now. So we did A and B, we're doing C and D now. So on your same piece of paper, underneath what you've written, you're going to write 1 to 9 again, and you are going to be choosing for each one statement, again, that closely represents you. So for number one, I ask probing questions when learning a new subject. If that sounds like you tick C. Or I am good at picking up hints and techniques from other people. If that sounds like you, then you tick D. Okay, so I'm just going to give you maybe 2 minutes or 3 minutes to go through the statements and for you to tick the one that sounds more like you. Remember, like you see on the screen, you must have 9 ticks in total. Doesn't matter if there's more in column C or more in column D, but in total, you're going to have 9 ticks. Okay, I think everybody should be done. Just give me an indication if you are not and you need me to stay on this slide for another minute. Just please put it in the chat. Otherwise, I'm going to go to the next slide. Okay, colleagues, anything in the chat?
Yes, there is a question. Just trying to get it. Probing is the same as inquiring, right?
Yes, yes. Okay, I think we can go on. So you've ticked, you've chosen the statement. Now let's go into actually finding out what your learning style is. Okay. So now right at the bottom, remember you're going to go back to on your page. On the top, you've got 1 to 9, and you've got A and B column. You're going to go back to your ticks, and at the bottom, you're going to do a total now. Okay, so here for this person, this is the example. You've got 2 ticks under A. They've got 7 ticks under B. And so then you are now subtracting your A from B. And it's okay if you get a negative number, okay? Because you will still be able to plot that on the graph to figure out your learning style, okay? So for your first one, your A and B column, total how many ticks you got for A, total how many ticks you got for B. Remember, your ticks must total to 9. And then you are saying A minus B, and then you write what that total is. Doesn't matter if it's negative, it's fine. You put the negative sign there to indicate it's negative. Okay. Okay, has everybody done that?
One of the students, they say they are confused. So they're asking if they are required to write on the slide, and if so, how?
Okay, you're not required to write on the slides. What you needed to do is you needed to have a piece of paper and a pen. And as I went through the previous slides, you were writing down the numbers 1 to 9. And then you would create column A on your page and column B. And for 1, you would either tick under A or tick under B. And for 2, you would either tick under A or tick under B. So you would have to be doing that. As I went through the previous slides, you would have to be doing that on your piece of paper, not on the actual slides. Okay, is anyone else confused? Are you able to do your totals for A and B? If you are, just put a yes in the chat for me or a thumbs up in the chat just so that I know that you've been able to do the calculation.
Students are saying yes.
Great. Thank you so much, students. Okay, so don't panic yet, okay? We're going to get there. I'm just showing you the step. Step 1 would be A and B. You can see it highlighted. This axis for A and B is highlighted in red. That the example I am using, the person's score that they got for A and B was -5. So they've plotted it here. I'm going to leave up the graph at the end for you to plot it, but I just want to show you that this is the A and B axis, and there's positive scores and negative scores. So it's okay. You will be able to plot it once we do the next one, and I will leave up the graph for you to plot both. I just want to show you where you'd be plotting A and B. Okay, now you're going to move on to the second half of your page where you've again put your 1 to 9 numbering, and you've got a C and D column on your page. You've got your ticks based on the statement you chose that closely resembles you. And then you're going to, again, total it. So you're going to total how many ticks in column C, how many ticks in column D, and you're going to say the number of ticks in C to minus the number of ticks in D, and then you are going to get a specific number there. So I'm going to let you do that quickly. So remember, in total, you would have 9 ticks. So here we can see the 6 and the 3 would give us 9 ticks. And then you say your C, the amount you got for C, minus the amount you got for D, and that's how you get the amount that you're going to plot on the graph, the second amount you're going to plot on the graph. Okay. Just give me an indication again on the chat, students, if I can move on, if you've been able to do that. Colleagues, have I got an indication?
Yes, they
Yes,
say they are
yes,
done.
Oh, perfect. Okay. Here we are. Now you're going to be now plotting your second value that you calculated. You see now in blue is the C to D axis. Okay, and you would plot, there's number 3, so we put number 3 there. So now you can look on your screen. Obviously, it's going to be a bit difficult for you to write it on the piece of paper, so don't worry about that. But you can look at your screen and take your A to B number. Remember, A to B is going across. There you can see it. And put your one finger on the A to B number that you have, and you can put your second finger on the number you've gotten for C to D, and you will see, if you have to see here, if you draw a line between the two, if your finger and basically move from that one number, from A to B number to the C to D number, you should be able to see which quadrant you fall in. Okay, and you can see there's 4 quadrants for 4 learning styles. Okay, so this might be a little tricky purely because we're doing this online, but tell me if you're having a problem. Okay, so put it in the chat if you're having a problem, or if you are able to plot both of the values you got that you calculated for the A to B axis and the C to D axis. If you can plot it, you can use now your fingers on the screen and plot it. One value to the next value, you should see which quadrant you fall in. So the top quadrant here is accommodator. The second quadrant here is diverger. The one at the bottom is assimilator. The one that you can't see here in the left corner is converger. Okay, is everybody able to plot it and move your finger across so you can see which quadrant you fall in? If there's any questions, put it in the chat. If you are able to, then say, give me a thumbs up or a yes in the chat.
There's a student who said, can you please repeat the steps to plot?
Okay, no problem. So remember you calculated A to B. So here you see on the left-hand side of the screen, you see an A with a circle and you see a B with a circle at the end. So the value for A to B for this example I used was -5. So there you see a red dot by -5. And then you calculated a value where you said your number of ticks for C minus your number of ticks for D, and you got a value. For this person, the value they got was 3. This is your C to D column. Okay, it's vertical. So you see C at the bottom, it goes up to D. So then you would plot what your value was when you said C minus D. For this person, it was 3. And then when you move across from the one value to the other value, as you can see, this red line, it will indicate which quadrant you fall in. That quadrant is then telling you your learning style. Okay, so I'll give you a minute, maybe just to review that. Look at your calculation. Look at the value you got when you said A minus B. So the number of ticks you got, and you said A minus B, what was the value? And then look again on your piece of paper when you said the number of ticks you got for C, C minus the number of ticks you got for D, and the value you got, and then plot it on the screen now. You're just going to have to use your finger, unfortunately, because we virtual, so you have to just use what you see on the screen at this point. Okay. Give me an indication if you're able to identify the quadrant you fall in, which means the learning style that you are. Put it in the chat if you know what you are now. Are you an accommodator? Are you a diverger? These are still names. I will explain what it means and what your preference is if you have that particular learning style. But these are the names of the learning style based on the quadrant that your scores fall in.
There's a question.
Sure.
So they're asking, with the example you have, which quadrant does the student fall under?
They fall under assimilator, because you can see the red line. It falls here in this quadrant here. It's crossing in this quadrant. So where it crosses is the quadrant it falls in. So the quadrant would be the square here. You can see the square that says assimilator. So the line is within that quadrant. It's not on top. It's not on the left. It's not on the top left either. Okay, so give me an indication in the chat if you've identified the quadrant you fall in and the learning style you are. So put it in the chat which learning style you are. Are you a diverger? Are you an accommodator? Are you an assimilator? This quadrant here, sorry, it's covered by the positive scores, but this is a converger.
Students have identified their
Their learning
style.
style.
Yes.
Okay, great. Can you just read out some of them for me so I can hear what maybe the majority is? Or do we have a whole lot of different ones?
Yes, the other student, he's saying, so if I got 3 for C, D, am I assimilator? And if I got 1 for A and B, am I diverger?
Okay, so let's say you got 1 for A and B, right? And your score for C and D is 3. You would be an assimilator because you only fall in that quadrant. What I mean by fall in that quadrant is if you have to draw a line between the two scores, between the 3 and between the 1, it doesn't go on the top, it goes in the bottom, which means you are an assimilator. I hope that makes sense.
Looking from the chat or the Q&A box, a lot of students are saying they are assimilator. And yeah, but a lot of them are saying assimilator.
Okay. All right. Great. So from that, I know it was a bit tricky because we're doing it online, but if you were unsure about anything, you are welcome to email us. I can do this one-on-one with you, or you can listen, you can get the recording and you can go through it again. So here are your 4 learning styles, your divergers, which are those that are more imaginative. your assimilators, which are theoretical, your convergers, which are known as the decision makers, and your accommodators, which are more practical. So I'm just going to give you like an overall understanding of each one. So in terms of your accommodators, they tend to act on their gut instinct. They are, if you look at where they fall in the quadrants, they are, the choices they're making is feeling and acting. Those are the two choices they're making and their preference. So they have a very hands-on approach, a very practical approach. They would jump in and do a task. They would have those half-baked ideas. So I'm just giving you an overview, but we're going to go over what the strengths are. And then you have your divergers. The choices they're making is feeling and observing. Your divergers tend to be imaginative and emotional. So it's about how they feel about their learning experience. And they tend to use their imagination to come up with solutions to problem solve. Then you get your assimilators. Your assimilators are concise. They have a logical approach. Before they even start a task, they require good, clear explanation. They really excel at understanding a wide range of information and organizing it in a logical format. And they are more interested in ideas and abstract concepts. They want to think something through before they will start a task or before they will jump in. So an example is maybe before you even start an assignment, you've got to do lots and lots of research, because you want to understand something clearly before you even begin the task. That would be a characteristic of an assimilator. Then you get your convergers. Those are your thinkers and your doers. They prefer technical tasks. They try to find practical use for ideas and theories. So when they think about ideas and theories, they want to find the practical use. They use their learning to find solutions to practical issues. So when they want to learn, they want to apply what they're learning. They want to jump in, they want to think about it, and then they want to jump in and do. Okay, so those are your 4 learning styles. This is an example of how each learning style would approach learning how to ride a bike, for example, just so you can grasp the difference. So divergers, they think about riding and they will watch someone ride before they will decide to ride. Your assimilators, they want a clear grasp of the concept of riding a bike. What is it based on? Okay, it's based on balance, which means I need to figure out balance, right? So they want to understand what goes into riding this bike before they will jump in and ride the bike. Your convergers will seek practical tips. How do I balance? What do I need to do? Do I need to put my foot on one pedal, on both pedals? From someone who is riding a bike or from an expert before they get on and ride the bike. Your accommodators will just leap on that bike and just give it a try, whether they know what's involved or what's not involved. So as you can see, this is where your preference comes in your learning experience. I'm just using riding a bike to give you an example because that's learning something new. You would have a preference as to how you approach that and how you respond to that. That is your learning style. Now I'm jumping into the strengths. If you've still got your piece of paper out, write down these strengths. This is what you need to use and hone in on when you are learning something new, because these are the positive things about your learning style. And then you want to use these strengths in order for you to maximize your learning experience. So for an accommodator, they get very involved. They like to volunteer. They work well with people in teams. So if you're an accommodator, you've got to think about a study group, or a study buddy, because this is how you work well. This is how you learn. This is how you maximize your learning experience. Learn through discussing issues with others. Okay, you know, on my Unisa, there's forums, right? If you're an accommodator, you make use of it. This is how you maximize your learning. You're willing to take risks and experiments, which means you're willing to try things out. This helps you gain confidence. You ask a lot of questions. So it would be important, even though you're in an institute that's as distance learning, it's important if you're an accommodator to still be asking questions. So, you know, check out your lecturer's email address. Ask the questions. Check if there's tutorials available. Ask questions. Accommodator tends to work quickly, and they're quite enthusiastic. They like excitement, and they can have lots of energy. Okay. The accommodator likes a hands-on approach, so they learn through trial and error. They want to figure it out. They're also very adaptable and open-minded. They like the excitement of new experiences and challenges. So if you're an accommodator, write down some of these strengths or take a screenshot of some of these strengths so that you can use your strengths while you are learning this semester. Okay, if you are a diverger, you can see things, you can see new ways of doing things, you are creative, you come up with creative solutions and alternatives. You're good at seeing the big picture, which means you can connect the ideas together. When you're learning something in your study guide, you can connect the concepts together. You listen to others and you share ideas. You can present work in a novel and artistically appealing way. You use your intuition. A diverger likes to brainstorm and generate ideas. They can also see, because they see the big picture, they connect things together. They can think about long-term implications. They view concrete solutions from different perspectives. So your diverger is someone who can think about a problem from a different perspective. They learn by listening and observing, and then thinking about what happens. They can pinpoint new important questions. So you would want a diverger in your study group because they can then see things from a different point of view and they might have important questions. The diverger also likes working in groups to gather information. They also listen with an open mind and receive feedback, and they also use their intuition. So how do they feel about the learning experience? They tend to lean towards their feelings, and then they observe before they jump into something. Right, your assimilator, they like to understand everything they're working on. They pay attention to detail. They're independent, so they like working alone. With minimum help from people around. They plan well. They can plan in advance. They're good at making lists and timetables and plans. They can organize their facts. They can set really clear goals and can prioritize their goals. Your assimilator can reason things out step by step, and they prefer concise, logical explanations. They can be very thorough, very precise. So if you're trying to figure out, okay, does this really sound like me? Are you precise with your work? Are you thorough with your work? They have a preference to sticking to one thing at a time, so they don't like multitasking. They're good at asking probing questions. They work things out well on paper. So if you're an assimilator, you might find that typing doesn't work for you in terms of typing out summary notes. You might want to work something out on a piece of paper before you type something up. They may prefer readings and exploring analytical models. And the simulator really likes to have time to think things through on their own first. So if you're an assimilator, time management becomes really an important skill for you because you need the time to do the planning. You need the time to pay attention to detail. And you need the time to think something through because that's your preference before starting a task. And then your converger, they can also work really well on their own. They're quite independent. They're good at setting goals and making action plans, so how to meet their goals. They also organize their time well. They're good at getting things done. Remember, they are quite practical in their approach. They're good at researching and finding necessary information. They're good at drawing up a timetable and sticking to it. They're very results driven. That's why they can make action plans. They can see the application of a theory, so how to apply something. They read instructions carefully. They can research carefully. They tend to classify their notes and their filing, and then they pay attention to detail. And they prefer dealing with technical problems rather than social problems or interpersonal problems. They're also good decision makers, but they base their decision on finding solutions to questions or problems. So these are, in terms of your learning style, these are the strengths of your learning style. And you should make use of them as you are learning in the semester. Make use of the fact that you plan well. Make sure you are planning. Make sure you have, maybe if you're really good at organizing your time, make sure you have a weekly schedule so you maximize it based on these strengths. Now, these are your potential areas of growth. We don't like to speak about weaknesses anymore. The reason why is, because from a psychological point of view, we understand that it's important to have a growth mindset, which means that you are able to continue to grow. Your ability is not fixed. So same with your learning style. You have a preference. It does not mean that you cannot grow, does not mean that you cannot develop certain skills. It does not mean that you cannot learn how to touch on each base in that learning cycle. Okay, so for the accommodator, these are the things that you've got to excuse me, that you've got to focus on in terms of what you need to work on, because these things can become now impediments to you actually studying efficiently as well as meeting your academic goals. So for an accommodator, they're not very thorough. They can't be really bothered with detail. They don't plan in advance. So for an accommodator, what are the skills you need to work on? Planning. What are the skills you need to work on? Being more thorough with your work. And this is why sometimes working in groups and having a studying group is so great, because you can have people with different learning styles that can help you develop skills. The accommodator tends to not prioritize well. They may tackle too many problems at once. They rush into exam questions and essays without thinking them through. So as an accommodator, you might rush into assignment before reading the instruction through properly. So this is something you've got to take note of as an accommodator, because you now need to, okay, well, I need to slow down. I need to read something through. This is how you develop so that you are effective in your learning cycle. Neglect subjects that don't interest them. So a lot of times accommodators their reason around procrastination would be because the subject doesn't interest them. So they would leave it to last and then procrastinate doing it. Not good at organizing time, leaving things until last minute. So an accommodator would really benefit from time management skills, right? So if you're an accommodator, you've got to make a note of that. You've got to take that step of, okay, maybe I need to get the recording of time management. I've got to I've got to figure out how to plan my work in advance. They also tend to do insufficient preparation before they jump in and do a task. They can be a poor critic of their own ideas, and they might get bored easily, because if something's not interesting them, then they tend to get bored. Okay, and then let's move on to the diverger. The diverger might forget details, because what they're actually doing is understanding and looking at that big picture. They might wait too long before getting started and spend too much time working out alternates. Remember, they can see how things connect, so they might spend a lot of time thinking about alternates. They tend to not organize their work well. They don't like the work and of revision timetables. They tend to work in bursts of energy. They maybe really focus in the morning, so they work in that burst of energy, and then they don't do extra work at a later stage. They can get easily distracted. They may not be too assertive when it comes to friends or lecturers, or even when asking for help. Their preference is to observe rather than take action. So your diverge is someone who's got to, once they've done the observation, not spend too much time observing, or not spending too much time thinking about the big picture and all the alternates, but actually taking action. And sometimes they can miss critical ideas. Okay, so in terms of the diverger, they may not rework their notes or classify their material. So they may not file properly, or once they've made notes, rough notes, they may not rework those notes. So again, these are now the areas that you identify. Okay, as a diverger, how do I get better at this? All right, so I can attend the note-taking or listen to the recording of the note-taking workshop, so that I can learn how to actually rework my notes, my rough notes that I've made. Okay, and then the assimilator, they need too much information before getting down to working or starting. They're reluctant to try new approaches. They like to do things in a set way. They tend to not function well in groups because they're very independent. So as an assimilator, you might want to push yourself to at least engage in whether it's the forums, or engage with your peers in some way, in order for you to grow and maximize your learning experience. They tend to only trust their logic and not intuition. They tend to not really use people around them as resources, so their peers or their lecturers. Sometimes they can collect too much information before getting started. So your assimilator needs to actually open themselves up to using some of the resources available, engaging with peers, engaging with lecturers, also not collecting too much information. So they don't have to change their approach, but once you reach a certain amount of information, to say, okay, I've done my research for this amount of time today, I'm now going to get started on the assignment. So for the assimilator, there's certain things that they've got to also work on. The converger, they can be impatient with other people's viewpoints, and they tend to clash with other people. They think there's only one way of doing something or solving a problem, so they can be very headstrong. They don't really rely on any imagination, because remember, they're just thinking about things in a practical way. They're not very interested in the presentation of their work, so they might have great solutions, or they can apply something really well, but the presentation of their work is quite poor. So that would be an area of development. They can be more concerned in getting the job done than making sure it's a good job. So you can see how with your particular learning style, there's things you have to continue to work on in order for you to meet some of your academic goals, or in order for you to improve in terms of how you learn and be able to overcome some of the obstacles you would have in your own learning. They can also be too task orientated, so they're just worried about getting it done, which means they can then cut corners. So it's really important for a converger to learn to be a bit more thorough. So it's important for you to take note of this, because these can be the things that are stumbling blocks where you find, I'm not studying effectively because of 1, 2, and 3. And these are the areas you've got to develop the skills in. And these are essential skills for you to really maximize your learning and do well in your academics. Okay, so just a few more points on each learning style. Your diverger can multitask, they like flexibility, but they might really struggle to start tasks. They might procrastinate because they're always thinking about alternatives or thinking about the big picture. Your divergers can be a bit more emotional, because remember, their preference is how they feel about something, which means they might experience a bit more anxiety under pressure, which can cause them to make mistakes. Again, if this is you as a diverger, this is indicating that these are skills you've got to develop. And if you need help, you can always book a session for us to help you around these specific issues. They rush to complete tasks, and they might complete a task lacking the depth. Okay, so this is something that you've got to be aware of when you are approaching a task as a diverger. For the accommodator, they also like multitasking because they like jumping in and doing. So they struggle to plan. They struggle with sustaining their interest level. Because if they're not interested in something, then they might procrastinate around it, and their task completion depends on motivation and their interest level. So here with the accommodator, they've really got to look at how they're even scheduling their study time, because if they start off with all the subjects that they're interested in and they leave the subjects that they're not interested in, they're probably going to procrastinate around those subjects. So even in terms of this, you can understand how you go about your study habits, which need to then change. And then your assimilator, they need too much time to plan. They take long to start and finish a task. They don't like multitasking. And they take time to analyze and assimilate material. So here you've got to start limiting your time and manage your time well. And then the converger, you see what is needed, but don't take the time to learn how best to accomplish it. So you jump in a bit too quickly, and you might not be prepared to look at other perspectives. So for the converger, they need, for example, the diverger who looks at different perspectives and sees things from different perspectives. As a converger, you've got to develop that. Okay, I'm only thinking about this assignment in one way. Have I considered that I need to look at different aspects or different theories that might also be relevant to how I answer this particular assignment? They can be hasty to get things done, or hasty to answer an assignment question, but they might be premature in properly taking the time to understand what is being asked. And because they prefer working on their own, they might feel a lot of competition between peers, and in terms of group, there might be a bit of conflict. So as a converger, you've got to learn in a group how to listen to other people's perspectives, how to not only be interested in how you solve things, but also be interested in another solution, another perspective, so that when you apply a theory you're learning, you can apply it in different ways, which is obviously at a university level what they're looking for, your ability to apply and be critical about something. Okay, so that is it for the different learning styles, the strengths, and the potential areas of growth. So we've come to the end of our workshop. And at this time, I want us to just do a quick reflection, a task or exercise based on the information I've shared with you today, you've been able to identify your learning style, your preference, and you've been able to now identify your strengths of your learning style, the potential areas of growth that you need to work on, as well as what actually works best for you. Do you work best on your own? Do you work best in a group? So just a couple of points to reflect on, and I would really like it if maybe you would just answer one of these in the chat so that I can get an idea of just you reflecting on some of these. So identify 2 key strengths of your learning style. So as I went through those strengths, identify them so that you can make sure you use it as you are studying. Okay? Identify the areas that need to be developed in your learning style. Is it that you are you rush into tasks? Is it that you're taking too much time to get started as an assimilator? Is it that you actually you tend to work well in groups, but you haven't joined the study group or haven't seen if there is a study group available? And then how would you go about improving your skills in this area? So if it's time management, what's the next step for you in terms of improving your skills? And then lastly, now that you know your learning style, how will you approach your studying differently? So maybe if you can just put in the chat for us, I would say maybe put 2 strengths that you've identified from your learning style, or even 1 strength. And now that you know what your learning style is, how do you think you're going to do things a little differently? So if you can pop that in the chat, just to share with us and share with the group.
Few students are asking if they can get the presentation, the slides.
Okay, so what I'm going to ask you to do, absolutely, we can share with you. We can even share the recording. But what I'm going to ask you to do, students, is please complete our evaluation, and then we will make sure that we get you this presentation, or if you would also like the recording, we can send that to you on your My Life email.
One student is saying, excuse me, rooms for improvement as an accommodator, it's time management and study habits.
Okay, great, great, great. I'm so glad to hear that you've identified that. And I'm going to encourage you that once you've identified it, identify the next step. Okay, so time management, what do I need to do? And if you need help, we are available. You can book an appointment with us. You can email us in terms of helping you with time management skills. That's what we're here for as the counseling and career development unit. Any more comments from this reflection?
Okay, another student says strengths, logical and organized, research and planning, and then weaknesses, less focused on people, do not like working in groups.
Okay. So I'm really glad, and this is why I wanted to do the reflection, is so that I can see that you've been able to identify it. And even if you really don't like working in groups, sometimes it can be beneficial, and you can choose a middle ground. Maybe it's just using a WhatsApp group or using a forum. You can always choose a middle ground, but remember, it's always helpful to interact with your peers. You'll learn something from them. Okay, anyone else or any other comments?
Yes,
Go
there's
ahead.
another comment. 2 strengths, I research well and thoroughly. I manage time and plan accordingly. Then 2 areas to develop. I prefer working alone and not taking other ideas because I think that's the only way to get things done properly. I spend too much time collecting data and not starting sometimes. Then I could try to work with other people and learn better where the line is of overshooting research time.
Okay, great. Thank you so much for sharing that. You know, when we reflect, we're then able to change things. If we don't reflect, and that's why I wanted us to do this exercise, then it becomes difficult to pinpoint what we need to change. And remember, at the end of the day, we want you to succeed at your academics. So these things that are obstacles, these potential areas of growth, can be something that you can learn how to deal with and learn how to grow in. Okay, so to access our services, here are our contact details. We're available from Monday to Friday, 8 to 4 o'clock. You can email us, you can call, you can scan that QR code if you want to book a online via MS Teams counseling session. We provide services online using MS Teams, telephone, or email, or face-to-face. If you want face-to-face, you can phone or email us so that we can book a face-to-face session for you on campus. We're based on the Durban campus and the PMB campus respectively. And then we do have a few minutes for questions, but just to say thank you so much for sticking through this one. There was a lot of theory at the beginning, but I do hope that it's been beneficial for you and really helped you to understand yourself a little bit better in your learning. And we are here to support you on your academic journey and also to support you in terms of the areas of growth and the skills that you might want to develop. So thank you so much, students. If there's any questions, you're welcome to pop it in the chat at this point. Okay, colleagues, you can let me know if there's any questions.
There is a question. A student is saying, what's your learning style for students that are working and studying at the same time?
Okay, so remember, so the learning style is about your preference. So it isn't that you must have a certain learning style in order to work and study. We've got to look at your preference and we've got to help you develop in the areas of growth. So if there's other skills that you're lacking, let's say your learning style is the accommodator, and the accommodator struggles to plan their time or they rush through tasks. So as somebody who's working and studying, it means this now becomes a skill that you've really got to develop because you have to manage your time well, and rushing through tasks might not be helpful for you because it might not give you the type of the quality of work that you're happy with in order to reach your academic goals. So there's really no specific style that you need to be. The style is about what your preference is already. The only thing, the support we provide you as someone who's working and studying is then looking at those areas of growth and how we can help you develop the skills you need in order to really maximize your learning experience. I hope that adequately answers your question.
Another question. Student is asking if divergent means there's a bits and pieces of other learning styles.
Okay, so divergent would mean that you have a preference towards how you feel about something that you've learned and observing something that you've learned. So it would be your preference. And yes, there is a bit of another learning style. It would be the learning style that is closest to the diverger, which is your assimilator and as well as your accommodator. So remember, in terms of your learning cycle, you want to be able to have a little bit of each, because each one has its potential area of growth. So yes, the diverger might have a little bit of the two learning styles closest to it, but for every learning style, you want to develop in those particular areas that might be strengths of another learning style. I hope that makes sense.
Another question is, are these learning style sessions associated with academic tasks, or are they for us to understand and be able to indicate where individually we fall under with the learning styles and be able to tackle them?
Okay, so your learning style applies to your academics as well as how you work in general. So someone who, for example, is working full-time and studying, you would see your learning style happening in the tasks that you have at work, how you approach your tasks at work. You would see your learning style happening as in how you approach your academics as well. Remember, the main thing about the learning cycle is those 4 stages, which is you learning something, having a concrete experience about something. In the workplace, you will always learn something new or be exposed to something new that you learn. It will be the same in your academics. You will always then be reflecting or observing this new experience or new thing that you've learned. You'll be making conclusions about what you've learned, and then you will be trying out what you've learned. You will be doing the specific task at work, or you would be doing the specific assignment. So your learning style, it helps you understand in general, not just academics, in general, how you approach learning, and how you respond to learning.